Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The ocean sustains human life on many levels. Oceans produce 50% of the planet's oxygen. It helps moderate the climate. It supports jobs and economies, and is the main source of protein for more than 1 billion people around the world. But human activities are also impacting the ocean on many levels, with 90% of big fish populations depleted and 50% of coral reefs destroyed. We seem to be taking more from the ocean than can be replenished. Today, to mark World Ocean Day, we discuss what we can do to protect and preserve the ocean and all that it sustains. Joining us first on the show tonight, we have Professor Dr. Sumiani Yusoff. She's Director of the Institute of Ocean and Earth Sciences at University of Malaya. Good evening, Professor Sumiani. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, I'm hoping that you could help us understand a little bit better the state of our oceans and marine life right now. Perhaps share a little bit about how you've observed or researched how our oceans have changed over the last decades.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much, Malaysia and Sharaad, for inviting us from University of Malaya, Institute of Ocean and Earth Science. As we know, today is the World Ocean Day 2021. And the idea of World Ocean Day was first proposed in the year 1992 at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And the idea was proposed to celebrate the ocean and also humans' connection to the sea, and also to raise awareness about the crucial role of how ocean plays in our lives. Because, as you know, the ocean produces at least 50% of our planet's oxygen, and it's home to world's most Earth biodiversity, vast biodiversity. And is also the main source of protein for more than 1 billion people around the world. So the kind of involvement that the ocean has in our daily life makes it important for us to actually protect and preserve it. Thus, this year's theme of World Ocean Day is, I think, very apt with the current pandemic situation that we are facing now. It is actually entitled The Ocean, Life and Livelihood. I think this year's theme is rightly chosen over the course of our current pandemic situation to shed light, especially on ocean as a life source, supporting humanity and all life on the earth. So I think it should provide us an opportunity for all key players, stakeholders, including societies, coastal communities, scientists, government and NGOs, representatives and others, to have more deeper understanding of the ocean, to explore the connection, and also to understand the need for building a new balance to the ocean. So we need to manage the ocean with new approaches, innovation, and also informed decision making, because we see that the ocean is actually now faced with a lot of threats, especially with the current trends of global warming and climate change. There is the potential of sea level rise increase, ocean acidification, sea surface temperature, and so on. So definitely, I think everyone of us, especially coming from the university as scientists, we have to ramp up on our research and development to ensure that whatever decisions that can be made, policies, the right policy tools, mechanism, and framework is being adopted to ensure that we protect and conserve as much as possible the sea and how it will affect our livelihood.
Yeah, I mean, can I ask you, Sumiani, in the news recently, we had the story of Turkey's battle now with sea snot. And over the years, we've also had, I think red tide issues in China, all the way to Chile, and so on and so forth. But along with that news is this, you get the sense that policymakers and politicians believe that there are options, or there technological solutions to some of these problems. I think they use clay for the red tide problem in China and so on and so forth. Can you help us understand the problems that we're creating, the solutions that we seem to be responding with? What's the state of play in terms of those kinds of issues?
You see, the sea, the ocean issues actually cross-sector the world, yeah? And hence, I think there is a need for suitable framework for collaborative and coordinated work to enhance ocean-related targets through stronger, to me, science, research and science, and issues pertaining to pollution or issues related to harmful algae bloom and so on, even marine litter, they are all actually interconnected. And we live in a global environment whereby every country's output or emission will have an impact to the global seas that is surrounding us. Remember, we are actually 70%. Our Earth surface is 70% seas, and we are all interconnected to the different seas, amongst our borders, And for example,
Professor, can I ask you, are there specific global treaties or international accords that look specifically at protecting, preserving the world's oceans? Is there a concerted global effort to try and protect our oceans?
Generally, I think the United Nations SDGs is one very good global initiative that's looking at comprehensive approach towards achieving sustainable development. And we have SDG 14 specifically on life underwater that actually has got all the indicators to actually address issues pertaining to conservation and protection of our marine life and also our coastal sea condition. On top of that, I think regionally we also have participated in, like for example, Malaysia has participated in some policy making together with our regional partners and also NGOs and also government agencies, whereby there is actually concerted effort to actually protect, especially things like overfishing and also pollution control. And I think globally there's also integrated and concerted efforts by especially NGOs, like coastal cleanup and so on, which is actually taken a lot of interest also amongst our local NGOs. And we are picking it up in terms of also participating in trying to actually push forward the agenda for the Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development. And if you know, our Ocean Decade for Sustainable Development, which is from 2021 to 2030, has also been supported and picked up at the national level, whereby our ministry has actually officially launched at the national level to ensure that we try to formulate a framework and the right policies to protect the ocean, being a maritime nation with more than 4,000 kilometers of coastal line.
Yeah, can I ask you about that? The relationship between oceans, seas, coastal areas, and also lakes, because when you look at definitions of what a national policy and national ocean policy would be, it has these three components. It talks about oceans, coasts, and lakes, or Great Lakes. Can you help us understand how these different bodies of water or parts that relate to bodies of water connect?
As you know, the situation and also the environmental considerations that actually links our water bodies are actually all coming from inland. Most of the pollution or the problems that we face from pollution in the sea comes from mainland. And when we say mainland, it is actually coming from the rivers, from the lakes, the streams. So whatever we do in the city or in the coastal areas eventually will end up into the ocean. And remember, currently, in the world, we have great patches of ocean pollution, and also things related to the problems due to emissions and also pollution that is caused by big industries, be it from urbanization program or from industrialization and things like that. And if there's no correct or appropriate policy at hand, we would not be able to actually safeguard our ocean, because whatever comes from the mainland goes into the sea eventually. And the Great Ocean Garbage Patch is actually a testimony to that.
Right, that was Professor Dr. Sumiani Yusoff from University of Malaya's Institute of Ocean and Earth Sciences. And after this, we're going to be talking about precisely those policies that can, in a way, help safeguard our oceans. So stay tuned to consider this. Hi, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. Today, on World Oceans Day, let's consider what we can do to renew focus to conserve and sustainably use our oceans, seas, and marine resources. Professor Datuk Dr. Azizan Abu Samah is a senior research fellow with University of Malaya's Institute of Ocean and Earth Sciences. He's also the director of the National Antarctic Research Centre of Southeast Asia. Professor Azizan, thank you for joining us on the show tonight. Now,
Thank you for having me.
We've been discussing on the show the need to protect the oceans of the world. And while I think this is a global issue being discussed on a global forum, also there needs to be local solutions. I'm just wondering if we could look more hyper-local. What are the policies that Malaysia has in terms of oceans, and what kind of framework do we have governing bodies of water that surround us?
Okay, we have two important international agreements, which is UNCLOS, United Nations Law of the Sea Convention, and the other one that we signed for is the Convention of CBD, Conservation of Biodiversity. And so these are two of our international obligations, and I think in that respect, all the littoral countries, especially, I'm just talking straight about the Strait of Malacca and also the South China Sea, in which basically all the littoral countries are signatory to the UNCLOS and then to the CBD, conservation. So these are the two international governance for the open seas. And the one that we have is what we call sovereign territory, is what you call our 12 nautical mile, in which basically Terengganu will have their own 12 nautical mile, and they will have their own jurisdiction. Kedah will have its own jurisdiction, and then basically each will have their own fishery quota, fishery rules. And that's why when you go to any small port, fishing port, you see the Cape of Kedah, and then you can see the Penang or the Perak licensing on the boat, because this is very much controlled by the state. So in terms of artisanal fishery, that means fishery within the 12 nautical mile, that's very much controlled by our fishery rules. But in terms of further deep sea fishing, then we have the more international UNCLOS, our EEZ, and also our CBD obligation.
Yeah,
so,
if I could just jump in, and ask you, it's I guess in some sense you're painting a picture of those kind of jurisdictional issues that have largely been resolved, because we know there are conflicts over certain parts in the region and involving Malaysia and so on and so forth. But I guess when it comes to thinking about the ecological nature of seas and bodies of water, they're kind of borderless, aren't they? And
yes,
problems
that's right.
So could you help us understand that aspect of it?
No, they are what you call large marine ecosystem. And one of the biggest and the most productive large marine ecosystem is the South China Sea. I think yearly it brings about there's about 10 million ton of catch of fish in the South China Sea, and whether that can be sustained or not, that is one of the issues that we need to consider. So when you want to manage a large marine ecosystem, uh, the, the two components of the South China Sea, the south of the South China Sea, where we are situated, and the north of the North China Sea, they are all interlinked. And the productivity of the South China Sea is very much linked with the East Asian monsoon. And so this is where our IUF research is important, because I'm the one who works on air-sea interaction. And it has also to do with climate change, because if let's say the East Asian monsoon is weaker, then the productivity of the South China Sea goes down. And this is the primary productivity, the one that and so the South China Sea is also linked to climate change in terms of resources.
Professor Azizan, looking at preserving sustainability within South China Sea, preserving the productivity, the marine resources within South China Sea, I'm just wondering how the geopolitical struggles come into play, because again, the ecological system is borderless. Yet we have all these, boundaries and nation-state claims over bodies of water. How does that impact your work?
I think it impacts a lot, because I was involved in one research project called Shiba, and part of it is a biological research. So the moment, so we were doing a cruise along Sabah and Sarawak. And so this is an international group. We have Malaysia and we have Philippines inside the ship. And the moment we go into the Philippine water, our people cannot collect the fish larvae anymore. The Philippines won't allow us to do it. And similarly, when we were doing some work over, let's say, in the Sulu, and of course, when you look at the Malaysian, what you call territorial Malaysian, so-called EEZ in the Sulu, is very narrow. And so, you can't, you need international cooperation in order to do that. And there is the Asian Institute of Biodiversity, and also there's the ASEAN China Code of Conduct. And these are some of the, what you call the potential area in which we can then do a good job. Now, the main thing that, when you want to do conservation, you must know the fish stock. How much fish for a particular fish that you have. We don't know the fish stock, because you can't go and chase the fish all over the place. So, how do you conserve when you don't know what you have? And so this is
I just want to ask you if you could, because you painted really kind of clear picture of what's happening in the South China Sea, and of course, East and West Malaysia kind of bookend that part of the world. But what about the Straits of Malacca? I understand you also work on that, and what extent, because we think of it as a kind of commercial channel in many ways rather than ecological, but it obviously has those concerns. Can you help us understand what's happening on the Straits of Malacca side?
Well, in terms of fish catches that we have, the Strait of Malacca, especially Perak, is one of the biggest fish catch that we have. So we depend quite a lot on the west coast for fish. And Strait of Malacca is also relatively quite what you call a productive sea, and plus the Andaman. And one of the things that you must realize, when you go to, let's say, to the Western Pacific, which means the Philippine side, in the warm pool side, is quite poor in productivity, primary productivity. That's how you measure whether you have enough, whether you have the plankton to support the fish. So the main area where you have a lot of primary productivity is very high, the Strait of Malacca, the Andaman, and the South China Sea. So as I said earlier, so these are very important fish area for us.
Right. Can you help us understand what goes into studying the conserving fish stocks? And I'm just wondering because, there's so many challenges to oceans and bodies of water like the South China Sea, like the Straits of Malacca. I mean, are we talking about the challenges and the threats that come from climate change? Are we talking about the threat of pollution, or is it overfishing? Help us understand which is what kind of threats our waters are facing.
I think there are two major threats. The first is overfishing, and also because of what we call illegal, undeclared, unreported fishing. And you can see that in the news. You can see Vietnamese fishing boat coming into our sea, or the Indonesian burning some other fishing boats. And of course, as I said, with the South China Sea, we have also quite a lot of fishing vessel coming from China fishing into our region. So how you when you look at the EU as an example, for the North Sea they give quotas for different states, and you're supposed to work within each state will have a quota. We don't have that in Malaysia, or even in Vietnam, or even in China. So it's like it's like a cowboy. Everybody goes for themselves. So
would a quota be difficult, Professor? Would a quota be difficult to enforce?
Well, you have to somehow. This is where ASEAN is important. ASEAN plus China is important because we are the one that need to work on it. And this is something that, because as I said, all the country are members assigned a seat to the UNCLOS. And one of the things about UNCLOS and the CBD is conservation of marine resources. And I think we need to expand the marine protected area within, and I think there are suggestions, especially you must remember Spratly and Paracel, they are refugees because this is where all the big areas of corals are in the middle of the sea. I'm not talking about the one by the coast. The one by the coast is very much under territorial, but what about the Spratly Island? There are about 200 islands around the Spratly. What about the Paracel? Now, who's governing and who's looking after it? But these are refugees. These are where the coral reefs are.
Yeah, Azizan, can you help us understand? I'm very interested in the fact that you're director of the National Antarctic Research Center of Southeast Asia, because the Antarctic really is a test case for international cooperation, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how well?
The main thing with the Antarctic is that they have a treaty, the Madrid Protocol, which protects the environment. And that treaty is among the best environmental treaty that you can have in the world. And they have what you call CAMLA, where they meet. And as you know, they established one of the world's largest marine protected area in the Ross area. So maybe it's something that we can learn from them. But it needs international effort because you're talking about what you call LME, large marine ecosystem, and the South China Sea is bigger than Europe. It's about 3 million square kilometers of and nearly semi-enclosed sea, and it's one of the most productive and one of the most highly have a hotspot of biodiversity. And I think we need both international community, like UNCLOS, to come in, but we also need the ASEAN China to really sit and look into the South China Sea, and it is in a way a huge problem because with climate change, you are bringing another uncertainties into the South China Sea, because you must remember when we had El Nino and the sea surface temperature went up, we had coral bleaching. And
Right.
so this is another what you call input that needs. Malaysia alone cannot do it. We need the whole ASEAN plus China to do it.
Okay.
And
Well,
the
that's all
other
the
one
time we have for you on this
Yeah, sorry.
episode of the conversation. Thank you so much, Professor Azizan. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have on the show tonight. That was Professor Azizan Abu Samah from University Malaya's Institute of Ocean and Earth Science, speaking to us on World Ocean Day. That's all we have for you in this episode. But before I leave you tonight, a reminder that you can get all the news and information on COVID-19 vaccines on astroawani.com, as well as the Astro Awani app. Thank you for watching the show tonight. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
We will be back with you same time tomorrow. Till then, good night.
Good night.